Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are wading into some pretty deep water, emotionally speaking.
Yeah, definitely.
We're tackling one of life's, well, most gut-wrenching mental hurdles. It's about making a decision you know is necessary, you know is honest, but you also know it's going to cause pain or anger or just deep disappointment for people you really care about.
Right.
And we're not talking small stuff like, where to go for
But
dinner.
no, these are the big ones.
The life-altering ones
Mhm.
where your own integrity, your truth, it just slams right up against someone else's immediate feelings, their comfort zone.
hmm And to help us navigate this emotional minefield, we're leaning on a really insightful psychological framework. We're pulling pretty heavily from Chapter 8 of Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory.
Okay.
Our mission today, it's really laser focused. We wanted to distill let's say, the core operating manual that lets you separate your truth, what you need for your future, from the emotional reactions of others.
Which are inevitable, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they're explosive.
We're basically looking for the instructions on how to find and use courage when it feels almost impossible.
Okay, so let's start where the source material does, because
Yeah.
the example it uses is it's so high stakes and honestly brutally relatable. It kind of makes your stomach clench just hearing it.
Oh yeah, the wedding example.
Exactly. The listener who wrote in describing this intense dread just weeks before their wedding day.
Mm-hmm.
The fighting with the fiancé has amped up. They're having panic attacks, and they just can't shake this feeling that they're making a huge, colossal mistake.
And you can feel the dread, can't you? It's palpable in the right. And he knows, like, intellectually, he probably needs to call it off.
Right. The logic is there.
But he's paralyzed.
Yeah.
Absolutely paralyzed by the emotional cost. And that cost, I mean, it's staggering when you list it out.
Yeah, list it.
All the deposits are paid.
Yeah.
Both sets of parents are deeply invested financially and emotionally. Invitations are out.
Mhm.
Flowers picked. They're going to be intensely disappointed. Crushed. His fiancée. Heartbroken. Utterly heartbroken. And everyone they know likely going to be angry. At him.
Yeah. He becomes the bad guy.
Totally. So he's writing in, kind of hoping for reassurance that maybe he can just wait it out.
Mhm.
Because he just cannot imagine facing that landscape of external pain.
And reading that, the author mentions even their own heart just seized up. It's
Yeah.
that immediate, punch of empathy, isn't it? You instantly feel the weight of his guilt.
You really do. And that visceral reaction, that knot in your stomach, it really sets up the central idea we need to break down today.
Which is?
Which is that the right decision, the truly right one for you, it often feels profoundly wrong.
Feels wrong. Why?
Because the human experience is mostly emotional. It just is. Logically, rationally, we can often see the correct path,
Mm-hmm.
the path of integrity. But emotionally, we are so wired to avoid conflict, to avoid causing pain in others, that we end up prioritizing their short-term emotional comfort.
Over our own long-term,
Yeah.
everything.
Exactly. Tragically, it leads us to inflict deep, chronic, long-term pain on ourselves instead.
Yeah.
We choose self-suffering.
Okay. Let's unpack that more, because the core problem, like you said, is the clarity versus the emotion. We know the answer. So why is it so incredibly hard to just do it?
Right. It's that execution gap.
So intellectually, if you're having panic attacks and feeling dread weeks before your wedding, the answer seems crystal clear, right? Call it off. Don't go through with it.
Simple logic, yeah.
But the emotional weight, picturing that conversation, the actual reality of it, the tears, the shouting maybe, the lost money, it makes that logical answer feel completely impossible. So why? Why do our emotions, or really our anticipation of other people's emotions, have such veto power in these huge moments?
Well, it's kind of like a twisted ethical dilemma, isn't it? When you're in that spot, you're essentially choosing who gets hurt and when they get hurt. You're trading pain.
Trading pain. Okay.
And because most of us, are decent people, we're highly empathic, we unconsciously follow this rule: do not cause pain to others. Even if it causes significant pain to yourself.
So we default to self-suffering. We take the hit.
Precisely. We choose to inflict the pain on ourselves by staying quiet, by sticking it out in the wrong relationship or the dead-end job, by delaying the inevitable truth.
Right.
We do that instead of making the decision that's actually right for our own life, but which we know is going to be painful for someone else to accept.
So you're literally choosing chronic, grinding self-suffering over a sharp but maybe short-lived confrontation.
Yeah, over the acute pain of dealing with the external emotional fallout. And the crazy thing is, that often feels like the noble choice, the selfless choice.
I think that's so key. The paralysis isn't really about the action itself making the call. It's about the consequence. The groom knows what he probably needs to do, but he wrote in because he has absolutely no idea how he's going to handle the emotional tsunami it's going to trigger in everybody else.
Exactly. And that uncertainty, that fear of the unknown reaction, it's paralyzing. It's the fear of being seen as the villain,
Yeah.
the person who caused all the pain.
Yeah.
But we need to normalize something here. Making this kind of difficult, necessary decision, it's supposed to feel terrible.
Okay.
The source material actually puts a really interesting positive spin on this agony. It suggests that agonizing over a tough decision, feeling this crushing guilt and dread, that's actually presented as a mentally healthy response to a tough situation.
Wait, how? That feels counterintuitive. How is agonizing healthy?
It's a vital distinction, I think. The fact that this groom or, anyone facing a hard truth, breaking up, quitting a job they hate, confronting a family member about something difficult, the fact that they're worried about the disappointment, the lost money, the heartbreak, that's a strong sign that they are actually a good person.
Okay, it shows empathy.
It's empathy, exactly. If they didn't feel any dread, didn't care about the impact, well, that would be concerning, right? That borders on sociopathic.
Right.
But here's the danger.
Hmm?
You cannot allow this inherent goodness, this empathy, to drive the final decision.
Ah.
If empathy is the driver, it will stop you. It will stop you from doing the necessary right thing for your own life, for your own integrity.
And that deep empathy, that's what creates that visceral reaction we talked about earlier. Just discussing this situation, you feel a bit anxious, right?
Absolutely.
You feel that wave of dread for him. You can picture the fiance crying, maybe her father's face getting red with anger. Your own jaw kind of clenches.
Yeah, because our bodies were literally anticipating a fight or flight response. You're bracing for the impact, the confrontation. And this feeling, the dread, the knot in your stomach, it's precisely why letting people down, breaking hearts, is genuinely one of the hardest things we ever have to do in life. It doesn't feel like choosing between two decent options.
Yeah.
It feels like choosing between disaster now or maybe even bigger disaster later.
Okay, so we acknowledge the emotional hit is coming. The guilt, the dread, the anticipation, it's part of the package. So here's the crucial pivot point then. You somehow have to be able to separate yourself from your own immediate emotional reaction and from the anticipated emotional reactions of others when you're figuring out the right choice.
That separation, that's everything. It's the core skill, really. If you let those intense feelings, yours or theirs, drive the decision-making bus, they will almost always, almost universally, stop you from making the necessary right decision.
They keep you stuck.
They hold you captive. Captive to the comfortable maybe, but ultimately wrong status quo. So we have to get really clear on what it is we're truly trying to avoid.
Okay, so avoidance.
Yep.
When we talk about avoiding these situations, we often think we're avoiding the difficult action, right? Like making the phone call, having the face-to-face, the actual confrontations.
Right, that's the common understanding.
But the source material, it reframes this completely. It clarifies this misunderstanding about avoidance. What are we really trying to avoid?
Yeah, this is key. We are not primarily avoiding the confrontation itself. We are actually avoiding someone else's emotions.
Ah.
We're trying desperately to avoid dealing with their guilt trips afterwards, or their angry venting sessions, their bad moods that might hang in the air for weeks, their dramatic outbursts, or maybe even their stony silent treatment. That's the root of the internal conflict.
So we feel like we can maybe handle the action, but not the emotional reaction that follows.
Exactly. We feel like we can manage our own actions, make the decision, but we feel utterly, completely unprepared to manage the fallout of someone else's intense feelings. We dread dealing with their anger or their sadness more than we dread living a miserable, misaligned life ourselves. Which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
It is crazy. And this avoidance, I mean, it feels easier in the moment, right? Just put it off another day.
Of course, that's the appeal.
But it leads to these slow, drawn-out, soul-crushing patterns. Give us a few more detailed examples of how this avoidance shows up in life beyond the wedding scenario.
Oh, it shows up everywhere. Because, honestly, it's kind of the human default setting. Think about careers, for instance.
Okay.
We all know people, or maybe we are those people, who stay in the wrong career. Maybe it's law, medicine, finance, whatever, for years, maybe decades. Why? Because they are terrified of disappointing a parent who paid for their expensive degree.
Right. The guilt is huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
They might absolutely loathe their job, dread Monday mornings, but the thought of sitting down and telling their father, "Dad, I'm quitting this six-figure job. to, I don't know, become a woodworker or open a coffee shop.
Hmm.
It's just terrifying.
So they choose the slow burn.
They choose the chronic pain of 40 years of quiet misery over the acute, maybe tense but possibly short-lived pain of a 45-minute argument.
Oh, okay, that's the family angle. What about, like, friendships?
Friendships, too, absolutely. Maybe you have a friend who's constantly talking behind your back,
Yeah.
or maybe they're just kind of toxic, bringing negativity to your whole friend group. Deep down, you need to address it or even cut ties. But instead of the sharp, clean action calling them out, setting a firm boundary, having the hard conversation, what do most of us do?
We fade. The slow fade.
The slow fade, exactly. Start avoiding their calls, making up excuses not to hang out. You basically stay in this uncomfortable, toxic pattern
Yeah.
because you want to avoid the potential explosion if you're direct.
So you're choosing months, maybe years, of low-grade anxiety and awkwardness.
Instead of the necessary, potentially painful, but quick surgery, you're opting for the long, drawn-out death of the friendship, which arguably causes way more cumulative pain and anxiety for you.
And the cost, it just keeps compounding over time, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
The authors really hammer this point home, this crucial connection between time and pain. Easier now makes it way harder later.
Say that again?
Easier now makes it way harder later. Avoiding the hard conversation today. It will not magically become easier next month or next year. It usually gets harder. Think about the groom again. If he delays calling off the wedding for another 3 weeks, well, more money gets spent, maybe more gifts arrive. The emotional investment deepens for everyone, and the pain he eventually inflicts on his fiancée and the families. It's exponentially deeper, more entangled when he finally acts.
So you're trading that sharp, immediate pain, maybe a cleaner break, for this chronic, drawn-out suffering that ends up hurting both parties more in the long run.
Precisely. It's a
Yeah.
terrible trade when you look at it rationally.
So, counterintuitively, perhaps, the most courageous, the most honorable, and ultimately maybe the kindest thing to do is to deliver the hard truth quickly and cleanly.
It is. It's the ultimate act of respect, really. Respect for your own integrity, yes, but also respect for the other person's future. You're not wasting more of their time or leading them further down a false path.
Right.
But as the source notes, this is especially difficult. The avoidance gets stronger when the other people involved are perceived as being emotionally immature.
Okay, what does that mean in this context?
It means if you anticipate the fallout, it's going to be really dramatic. If you know or suspect, they'll resort to histrionics or major guilt trips or manipulative silent treatment or just huge over-the-top mood swings. You naturally want to avoid dealing with that.
Yeah, nobody wants to deal with that.
Nobody. And that fear, the fear of triggering and then having to manage that kind of reaction, is why people stay in dead marriages for a decade after they know it's over, or why they never quit that soul-sucking job, or never leave their hometown, purely because they are terrified of making a decision that's going to cause someone else to feel something strongly and react poorly.
You basically become a hostage to their potential outburst, their anticipated immaturity.
That's a perfect way to put it. You're held hostage.
And we see this paralysis everywhere, don't we? It's the person who won't confess a big secret that's eating them alive, or the person who desperately needs a leave of absence for their mental health, but just can't face the potential judgment or questions from their boss or colleagues.
Yes. In all these cases, they're essentially living a smaller, less authentic life. Why? To protect other adults from having to feel normal, healthy, albeit difficult, human emotions like disappointment or anger or sadness.
That's the trade-off, protecting them from feelings.
And it's an unsustainable trait. We absolutely must stop prioritizing their perceived inability to cope over our fundamental need to live an aligned, honest life.
Okay, so the cost of avoidance is incredibly high. We get that. But even knowing all this, how do we physically stop ourselves? How do we stop that reflex to immediately apologize for the decision or try to fix their anger or sadness the second it bubbles up? What's the mental boundary we actually need to build?
Now you're asking the million-dollar question. And that takes us right into setting those crucial boundaries and fundamentally understanding that their emotional reaction is simply not your job to manage.
Okay, boundaries. I want to bring in something powerful mentioned in the source, drawing from Dr. Lisa Damour's work, I believe. It helps reframe how we even think about negative emotions.
Yes, this is so important.
The common thinking is often that negative emotions, anger, disappointment, heartbreak, sadness, are inherently bad. Things to be fixed, smoothed over, or avoided at all costs.
Right, like they're assigned something's wrong.
Exactly. But the source material and Dr. Dahmer's perspective argues they are actually a mentally healthy response to life's inevitable upsets and disappointments.
This is a huge fundamental shift. Game-changing, really. If you change your mind about a major life decision like breaking up with someone, they are allowed to be upset. They're allowed to be disappointed, sad, even heartbroken.
It's appropriate.
It's appropriate. If a business decision you make means a client loses a contract, they are allowed to be angry. These feelings aren't malfunctions. They are normal, healthy, functional human responses
Yeah.
to loss, to change, to disappointment.
So if we can accept that these reactions are normal, even healthy,
Then we stop seeing it as our job to control them or make them go away.
and that's where we draw the line of control, isn't it? We can acknowledge the emotion, maybe even empathize with it, without taking ownership or responsibility for it.
Exactly. Adults are allowed to feel how they're going to feel. Let me repeat that. Adults are allowed to feel how they're going to feel.
Okay.
They are allowed to be angry at you. They are allowed to feel broken, devastated, overwhelmed, embarrassed, maybe extremely pissed off at you. And here's the crucial part. You cannot control their reaction. You just can't.
So trying to control it is futile.
It's futile, and it's actually counterproductive. Your attempt to control their reaction is exactly what manifests as avoiding the truth in the first place.
Yeah.
Or it looks like immediately walking back your decision once they get upset. Or apologizing profusely for the action itself, rather than just acknowledging the pain it caused. You're trying to manage the unmanageable.
Okay, but hang on. If the source also says this is especially hard with people perceived as emotionally immature, isn't there a risk here? If we just stand back and say, let them feel, don't we just sound cold? Or cruel, even, in that moment? How do you deliver a hard truth with compassion while still holding that firm boundary?
That's the crucial nuance, you're right. Delivery matters. Hugely. You absolutely can and should deliver a hard truth with immense compassion.
How does that sound?
It sounds like, look, I understand this decision deeply hurts you, and I am truly, truly sorry for the pain this is causing you.
Yeah.
That's empathy. You validate their feeling,
Okay.
but you immediately follow that validation with the boundary. But my decision to leave, call off the wedding, change careers is final. It's something I have to do to be honest with myself, and ultimately, it's the right thing for my life path.
So, compassion for the feeling, firmness on the action.
Precisely. The cruelty isn't in making the necessary decision. The real cruelty often lies in the delay, in stringing them along, letting the misalignment fester.
That makes a lot of sense. Compassion, not concession. Okay, this leads us directly to that really provocative, almost brutally honest part of the theory's summary, the truth section, focusing on what it calls the adult maturity gap.
Yeah, this is the part that can be a bit jarring for people to hear. But it's pretty essential for this theory to work as a practical boundary-setting tool in those high-emotion moments.
Okay, lay it on us.
The core idea is, other people's emotional reactions are not your responsibility to manage, full stop. Nor can you fix what might be their emotional immaturity. And then comes the really blunt assessment.
Which is?
Most adults have the emotional capacity of an 8-year-old, and you can't change that.
Wow, okay. That feels harsh. Are we literally saying adults act like 8-year-olds?
No, it's not meant as a literal blanket insult. It's defining a common coping mechanism under duress.
Okay, explain that.
It's saying that when confronted with significant pain, disappointment, or feelings of perceived abandonment, many adults regress. They fall back on coping mechanisms that rely heavily on making you feel guilty or responsible for their feelings.
Like what kinds of mechanisms?
Like throwing a tantrum, basically rage. Or intense guilt tripping, manipulative silence, excessive sulking, or playing the victim. That kind of emotional reaction, that perceived immaturity in handling the difficult feeling, that is the specific thing you must mentally wall off.
So the quote isn't a judgment, it's a shield.
Exactly. It's a tool for your own emotional defense in that moment. It's not a character assassination of the other person. It's a reminder to yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, this reaction I'm seeing, it's a reflection of their current coping skills under stress. It is not a statement about the validity or rightness of my choice.
Okay. And if you can genuinely accept that assessment, that their explosive reaction isn't actually an emergency that requires your immediate intervention to fix.
It immediately releases you. It frees you from the impossible, exhausting job of managing their feelings for them. If you truly understand that emotions, even big, messy, painful ones, are a normal, functional part of being human, and that other adults are allowed to feel the ups and downs, and crucially, that they can and will survive those feelings, well, then you could be much more courageous in making your own necessary decisions.
Because it's not your job to bubble wrap everyone else from feeling things.
Exactly. It is not your job to protect everybody else from feeling emotions. Emotions, even the strongest ones, are ultimately temporary, living a life based on your own alignment and honesty. That has permanence.
Okay, so if the decision maker's job is not to manage everyone else's feelings, what is their sole job and responsibility in these situations?
It's defined very clearly in the theory. Your only job, your only responsibility is to live your life in a way that is aligned with your core values and in a way that, gets you towards the future you genuinely deserve and desire.
And sometimes,
And sometimes, and we just have to accept this sometimes, that means disappointing someone or hurting someone's feelings temporarily. But you have to weigh that against the long-term cost of misalignment. That decade spent suffering in the wrong job or the wrong relationship, that cost is almost always far, far greater than the short-term cost of someone else's disappointment or anger.
okay. So we've established the why, the necessity of the decision. We've set the external boundary, their feelings are theirs. Now we have to deal with the internal battle. How do you manage the, quote, excruciating level of guilt and discomfort that you yourself will inevitably feel when you actually make that right but painful decision? How do you handle your own emotional fallout?
Right, because that guilt can be overwhelming. And that brings us to the actual strategy, the let them theory in practice.
Okay, so now we're shifting from the psychological defense, the why, to the how. How do you endure the internal storm? The source material uses a really great analogy here for coping with that intense internal discomfort, the guilt and anxiety that come with acting with integrity in these tough spots.
Yeah, the wave analogy.
The idea of learning to ride an emotional wave in the ocean. Tell us about that.
It's a perfect analogy, I think, because it normalizes the cyclical nature of intense feelings.
Hmm.
Emotions aren't static, right? They're inherently dynamic. They rise up, they crest, they crash, and then they recede.
Like waves.
Exactly like waves. Some days in your life, emotionally, are going to be pretty steady, maybe calm like a lake.
Yeah.
But on other days, like the day you actually pick up the phone and call off the wedding well, there's going to be a genuine hurricane that hits, as the source puts it.
Yeah.
You will feel massive waves of panic, guilt, deep emotional discomfort. You might honestly feel like you are absolutely drowning in the emotional aftermath of your decision.
It feels overwhelming, like it will never end.
Right. And the key reminder, the lifeline in that hurricane,
What is it?
is that you will not drown. It feels excruciating, yes, but you are stronger than the feeling. The feeling is temporary.
We have to acknowledge the pain, though, right? We can't just dismiss it.
Oh, absolutely. We have to acknowledge the immediate terrifying pain. Let's go back to the groom. Yes, calling off that wedding will absolutely suck. Yes, it will likely be one of the most painful, gut-wrenching experiences of his life up to that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the fiancé's dad might genuinely want to throttle him for at least a few months. Yes, the parents will lose their deposits and be angry and sad and confused. They will grieve the loss of the future they imagine. All of that is real. But the feeling of relief, of alignment, of being true to yourself on the other side of that hurricane, that deep breath of authenticity, that is worth the temporary price of the storm.
Okay, so how do we manage that storm tactically? The strategy has two core components, right? Let them and let me.
Correct.
Let's start with the external strategy first. Let them. What does this mean in practice, like in an actual conversation?
Okay, so let them thus is defined essentially as giving other people the necessary space, the permission almost to experience their intense emotions, whether it's anger, grief, disappointment, frustration, whatever it is. You let them have it without you jumping in to try and control it or minimize it or avoid it or change it.
So you don't try to talk them out of their anger?
No, the tactic is really about deploying empathy for their feelings, but maintaining zero ownership over their reaction.
Okay, give me an example. Let's say the angry father-in-law-to-be calls the groom, furious, demanding to know how he could be so cruel, waste all their money, humiliate his daughter. What's the let them script look like?
Okay, it might sound something like this. John, I hear how furious you are. I understand you're incredibly upset about the money and the disappointment and the embarrassment this is causing. And honestly, you have every single right to feel that way. I truly regret the financial pain and the emotional hurt this decision causes you and the family.
Okay, so that's the empathy part, validating his anger.
Exactly. Acknowledging his reality. But then, immediately comes the boundary. But my decision to call off the wedding is firm. It wasn't made lightly, and it's something I have to stick to for the long-term well-being and integrity of everyone involved, including fiancé's name.
Notice the crucial difference there. He apologizes for the pain caused.
Yes, but he never apologizes for the decision itself. He allows the father to be angry. That's the let them. And he calmly refuses to take responsibility for managing or fixing that anger. He doesn't get defensive, doesn't argue about the validity of the decision in that moment.
Okay. And the application of this, letting them have their reaction, it's powerful because it actually allows the necessary emotional processing to happen, right? It lets things eventually settle into a new normal.
Exactly. You stop trying to short-circuit their natural grieving or adjustment process just because it makes you uncomfortable. You let them feel it. The source even suggests that eventually people, maybe even those angry parents who lost deposits, will often come around. They might not only understand the bravery it took to make that hard call before the wedding, but they might even eventually respect or be proud of the integrity shown.
That takes time, though.
Takes time, absolutely. But the power dynamic here is critical for the decision maker now. The theory empowers you to mentally take a step back when another adult is having a massive, maybe disproportionate emotional reaction when they're acting, let's say, like that proverbial 8-year-old.
Yeah.
You refuse to let their outbursts or their guilt trips dictate your necessary actions.
So you stop prioritizing their emotional reaction, maybe their immaturity in that moment, over your own life path. You're basically delegating the emotional responsibility back to them where it belongs.
Precisely. You stop playing the role of emotional manager for every adult in your life, especially when it comes at the expense of your own happiness, your own future. You simply bear witness to their pain, perhaps with compassion, but you don't internalize it as your fault or your job to fix.
Okay, that's let them. Now let's flip it. Let's go inside. The internal strategy. Let me. What's the definition here? What's the practical power of this internal mantra?
So let me is the internal work. It's the constant, gentle reminder to yourself that the intense discomfort you're feeling is temporary. The affirmation, this too shall pass. It's telling yourself, I am stronger than this feeling. I am stronger than anyone else's emotional reaction.
It sounds like giving yourself permission.
It is giving yourself explicit permission. Permission to act on your truth, even when it's hard. You have to consciously let yourself feel your own emotions, rise up the guilt, maybe relief mixed with sadness, fear, and give yourself the space to process those feelings without letting them paralyze you or make you backtrack.
So this is like the internal courage mandate, the script you run in your own head when the guilt washes over you. What are the specific permissions we're giving ourselves with let me in the context of, say, the groom's high-stakes decision?
Yeah, it's the internal pep talk for integrity, it sounds like. Let me be honest with myself first and foremost, and then with others. And here's probably the hardest permission. Let me do the hard thing. Let me choose the action that is painful right now, because I know it is the right thing to do, and I know it will save me, and maybe even them, from so much more pain later.
That's the core trade-off again. Short-term pain for long-term alignment, future-proofing your happiness in a way.
Yes. And it's also, let me accept that other people are disappointed in my choice. And even harder, let me accept the consequences of their disappointment without trying to fix it or make it go away.
Wow, accepting the consequences.
Yeah. And ultimately, the goal is, let me give myself the opportunity to have the life I truly deserve. You cannot allow someone else's emotional reaction, or more accurately, your fear of their reaction, to block you from living that life.
So when the groom feels that crushing wave of guilt hit him after the phone call,
He has to inwardly, consciously say, okay, let me feel this guilt. Let me acknowledge it's here because I'm a good person who doesn't like causing pain. But let me also recognize it's a sign I'm doing the right, hard thing for my future. Let me sit with this discomfort. I will not drown in it.
so the let me component is what stops him from, say, calling the fiance back an hour later and saying, okay, maybe we can just postpone. Maybe we can work it out. It stops the backtracking.
Exactly. It solidifies the internal boundary. It prevents that immediate self-sabotage that often comes when the guilt feels too high, too intense. You are internally asserting your own maturity, your own integrity, and choosing your alignment over the immediate need for external approval or the cessation of discomfort.
It's really a profound yet simple two-part mental shortcut, isn't it? To cut through the emotional chaos and move from paralysis into necessary action.
It really is. It fundamentally shifts the focus from being consumed by their reaction to being grounded in your action and your reasons for it.
Yeah.
That's the game changer.
Okay. So we've covered the depth of the potential pain, the massive cost of avoidance, the crucial need for boundary setting, and now this practical two-part strategy, let them and let me. Let's try and bring this all home now for the listener. For anyone who might be sitting there right now, maybe agonizing over their own massive deferred decision.
Right. So the overarching solution here, the big learner takeaway, is really this. You maintain your power, your agency, and your integrity when you stop taking on the emotional burden of other people's feelings and instead act in a way that aligns with your true values and your necessary path forward.
The moment you try to manage or fix their feelings.
You lose control. You lose control of your own life, your own decisions. When you
Mhm.
say let them, you're essentially delegating emotional responsibility back to its rightful owner, them.
Okay.
And when you say let me, you are aligning yourself with your own maturity, your own integrity, and your right to pursue a life that feels authentic to you.
And this leads to that final conclusion, which, yeah, it might sound a bit harsh on the surface, but it's ultimately rooted in a kind of tough love for both yourself and maybe even for those around you in the long run.
Which is?
It's time to grow up. It's time to act like a mature adult, prioritize your own alignment, your own future, especially if it means causing temporary upset or disappointment or even genuine heartbreak for others. Because that temporary upset, however painful, is often necessary for both parties to eventually move towards lives built on honesty and integrity, not on fear and avoidance.
Well said. And that leads perfectly into the final provocative thought we want to leave the listener with today, something that builds on this necessity for action. Consider all the specific examples we've discussed: staying in dead-end marriages or relationships, clinging grimly to the wrong career path, avoiding those difficult but necessary family truths, delaying that critical breakup conversation. Think about those scenarios and ask yourself honestly, which one of those long-term, chronic, soul-draining pains are you currently inflicting upon yourself right now, today, simply in order to avoid the short-term, acute, and temporary feeling of someone else's anger or disappointment?
Wow.
Because that is the real choice you are making every single day that you delay. You're choosing your own long-term pain to avoid their short-term discomfort. Is that the trade you truly want to keep making?